Okay, so now we have all of our textures set up on our DAZ model. We're pretty much ready to go ahead and turn this guy into an UMA. Now, I've actually gone ahead and done that with the model in its current state. So if I just turn this guy off and start up our UMA, there's the finished article. But as you can see, something has gone slightly wrong. If I go into the scene view, what you should see, I'm very careful with my zoom here, is there's a nasty seam where the body parts join, and there's the same thing going on under the chin there. In fact, if I just have a look up here on the head, this looks awful. Now, we saw this in Blender, but I did promise you UMA would fix that for you, and here it quite clearly hasn't. The reason being, if you do see this, you have done something wrong, and I've made a mistake during this process. So we're quickly going to go back and fix that before we process any more of this and turn this into an UMA. Okay? So let's head back over into Blender and have a look at our file. Okay, so here we are back in Blender, and let's find out what we did wrong. It's really quite straightforward. If you remember, I selected everything in this scene, so I went ahead and clicked A. You can see I've got everything selected. Wonderful. And I used Control A to apply my rotation and scale, just to get this scale and the crazy rotation that was in there reset. Now, the problem with that is I had my Unify model hidden at the time, which means its transform isn't accessible. So when I reset all of these transforms, I did not reset the unified mesh. So consequently, UMA is trying to stitch them together with a tiny little model, and everything goes wrong. So let's hit A. Let's unhide my unified mesh and let's select it. And you can see, look, the scale is different from all of the other meshes. Something so simple can cause a massive issue. So watch out for that. I'm just going to Control A, fix the rotation and scale, and that will now work correctly. Okay, so one other thing I'm going to fix while I'm in here, while I think, if we have a look at our shape keys. So as you remember, we created all of these bodybuilder details, emaciated, portly, and our facial morphs for lip sync. So we brought those across, but one thing I want to bring your attention to is when these are all stitched back together, whatever morph is on each individual component will be referenced by this name. Now that's absolutely great. It would probably be better to strip some of this junk off the front, but for laziness I'm going to leave them in there. But what I need to be careful of is my underwear. If we look at the briefs, for example, they have the same morphs. So you can see they've got the bodybuilder morphs, the emaciated and the portly. However, the prefix is different. So this means when we add the briefs to our model and we start trying to adjust the morph, it will not use the morph for these because it has a different name. So let's just fix that. Let's go into our unified. Let's take the prefix off this model. Okay, this Genesis 8 mil. Let's go to my briefs and modify the prefix for all of these so they have the same name. Everything's going to work together. Okay, so rather than doing this, it might be a better idea in the first place to come up with some much simpler naming convention when you're doing your conversion. Okay, so now we have, I'm going to hit save here. There we go. Now we have a model that is ready to convert into an UMA. So I'm going to re-export that back into my Unity project as I did in the previous video. Okay, so here we are back in Unity. Let's have a look at converting our character into an UMA. So as you can see, I've imported UMA itself. That's sat there ready to go. I've also created this little utility folder. Now if I open that up, I've just got a set of textures which I always like to have handy, but I think most importantly is this empty one. What you can see here, I've got a black, which is a 32 by 32 black, mid-grey and a white. So these are just plain coloured textures, but the one that we're going to use a lot here is this empty, which is a fully transparent 32 by 32. And these just work as dummies when we've got missing textures. The one thing with UMA is you must have the correct number of textures on your base model. If you've got any missing, it won't generate. So this is where this empty comes in. We can just sling this in there and get things working. Okay, so create yourself something like that and we should be ready to go. So let's take our model out of the scene, bye, and set this up to work with UMA. So going to UMA, getting started, and we'll pull the DCS prefab in. Okay, and let's pull in a dynamic character avatar as well. He's always facing that way, so let's just reset his rotation here. There we go. And let's change, what do I want to change? Let's go into our additional utility recipes and get rid of this capsule collider, just so he doesn't disappear as soon as we run. So if we press play now, we should get a standard UMA appearing in our screen. There he is. Right, fabulous. So let's create our new UMA character. So in G8M I've created, so we had our raw folder which contains our model and materials and textures, which we did previously. I've created this UMA folder, which is where we're going to store all of our UMA stuff. So first thing we need is to create a Teeples file. So I'm going to have a look at my G8M model, and let's quickly have a look here. What you may notice is I have turned off use file scale here. If I just turn that back on and hit apply, this is where we had left off in our previous video. We hadn't changed anything. If I bring this guy in, he appears as normal. Currently that's no good for our UMA. I need to get rid of this scaling. So I'm going to turn that off and hit apply. Now if I bring him in, he'll appear absolutely huge. Yep, let's not worry about that. This is all to do with Blender's scaling. So I'm going to get rid of him. Just trust me that if we turn this off and have a scale factor of 1, everything should work fine. Okay, what else do I need to do? In the rig, I've turned this into a humanoid and let that generate. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to hit configure and save my scene. And instead of actually doing anything, oh, hang on, it says the character isn't in T-pose. Right, let's fix that. Let's go pose, enforce T-pose. There we go. His fingertips for some reason. Okay, what I'm going to do here, I'm not going to mess around with anything else. I'm going to apply that T-pose, but I'm going to go up to the UMA menu and extract the T-pose file. So this is what UMA uses to actually rebuild our skeleton. So if I pull that out and hit done, there we are. Nothing appears to have happened. Great, but it has. If we have a look in the UMA folder, content, generated, and T-poses, you'll see it's generated this G8M T-pose. So I'm going to grab that and stick that in my folder up here where I'm going to create my UMA pieces. So that's the T-pose created. What else do we need? So first we need to create a UMA core text recipe, and this is going to be our base. So let's call this G8M base recipe. Lovely. And we need to add that to the global library. So at the moment, if we look at it, it's got no race or anything. Don't worry about that. If we go to our global library, and this can be found in here, so the UMA menu, global library window. So I'm going to add my base recipe, and what we want it to see here is this UMA text recipe item should increase by 1. So we're at 103 now. Let's drop that in. 104. Great. So that's been accepted into the library. Next thing, I need to create a new, where are we? UMA core race data. And this is going to be called my G8M race data. And let's just edit that. Head to the inspector. Now we need to give our race a name. First of all, I'm going to hook up the recipe. So let's hook this recipe up here, and we're going to give it a name. We're going to call this G8M. Okay, now we need to add this to the library straight away. So again, let's go back to the library, let's drag this along, and we're wanting to see this race data change, so from 9 to 10. If you haven't given it a name, it won't be accepted, so watch out for that. So these guys are both in the library now. We can start connecting them together. So first of all, let's do our race data. Let's add our T-pose to that. That's great, so that's all ready to go. You may want to change what slots are available, but I'm going to leave them for now. And let's set up the recipe and say this recipe has this race. Great. So we've effectively got a race that we can use. If I went to my UMA now, I could actually pick G8M. Obviously there's nothing in there, so if I run a G8M, that won't do anything. But we need to start creating slots and add something to our base recipe to make that character generate. So the next step is to create our slots. So to do this, I'm going to use the UMA slot builder. Where is it? There it is. And I've docked it over here, which is always something useful to do. I'm just going to clear this out. As you can see, I've been doing stuff previously. So let's get rid of all of this, just so we're back to where you will be. So this should be what you see normally. Nothing in here. You'll see global because that's the standard name of an UMA bone, and everything else should be switched off. So what I'm going to do is start adding my meshes to here. So first thing, let's take all of the meshes that need to be stitched together, and we're going to use a seams mesh here. This is our unified mesh that causes those normals and those seams to be consumed, if you like. So let's add our unified. Oh, actually it won't accept that. It's got to be this skin mesh here. So this unified mesh up here. And let's start at the top. So our arms, we'll add those. The material I'm going to use, let's have a look. I'm going to use the UMA diffuse normal specular. That's the one I'm going to use. So this is going to be used for all the body parts. That means they'll all be mashed together into one file. Okay, so we'll select that. There we go. Destination folder. Let's have this go into our UMA folder. This one we created here. And the root bone, we'll leave that as it is. The element name, I'm going to call this G8 G8M underscore arms. Okay, so that's what the actual slot is going to be called. Because this has got morph data in it, the file can be quite big, so I'm going to turn binary serialization on, and this will reduce the size and make it a bit faster. I'm then going to say I want to create an overlay as well to hold my textures, and while I'm on, add those to the global library so I don't have to go ahead and drag them over in here myself. Okay, looks good. If I hit create slot, it takes a little while, but we should see success over here. That's great. So the process has created in my UMA folder, look, this G8M arms, and if I open this up, you can see I now have the 2 bits I'm after, the slot and the overlay. So let's go ahead and create all of these. So open up my model again. We did the arms. Let's leave the briefs, the cornea, the eyelashes. They're all separate, and we can add them later. So the eyes, that would be my next one, I think. So let's bring that one in. Let's change the name here to eyes and hit create. Next would be, let's miss this eye tier. Let's bring the face in, and again change the name of the element to face. And legs, bring that in, change the name. Mouth, change the name. And finally torso. That's great, and change the name. Okay, so that should have given us all of these folders with our base slots in. Obviously there are other ones to create. There are eyelashes, things like that. Let's just leave them for now and get the basic thing running. So again, let's go through these, and I'm actually going to peel my project view off here so I can open the textures up and start assigning these to the overlays. So in the arms, let's go into our arms overlay, and you can see not all textures are on the list, so let's open this up and add them. So you need a main texture, a bump map, and a specular gloss map. So for the arms, and they're right at the top here, so I'll just add these. Okay, that's the arms done. Let's go through and do the face. Okay, and I'll speed this up because you know what I'm doing now. Now, as I've come to the mouth, you'll notice I've managed to get the diffuse map, the bump map, but I don't have a specular map for the mouth. This is where my nice little utility package and this empty material comes in. I'm just going to drop that in there, and that will allow this to be generated. So very handy just to have these kicking around when you're generating UMAs. Okay. So that's all of our overlays set up. We're ready just to drop this back down here, and we can close this textures folder, and we can start building the base recipe for our character. So let's go through. I'm going to start with the torso. No, in fact, let's start at the top. So I'm going to start with the face. So I'm going to bring the slot in, and I'm going to bring the overlay into that slot. Great. And then collapse it. So that's the face in. Let's bring the eyes in. So the eye slot, and again the eye overlay. Great. And collapse that. And let's have the mouth slot, mouth overlay, collapse. Okay, let's work down. So we've got the torso next. Let's bring the torso in, the torso overlay. Great. Arms, sounds good. So let's collapse this. Arms, overlay. Great, and we should have one more left, which is our legs. So the legs slot and the legs overlay. We now have a working UMA recipe. So back over in this hierarchy, we set this up, G8M. What I'm also going to do is just open the advanced properties and tell it to load the blend shapes as well. Okay, let's drop that down and hit play. Let's see what happens. And nothing. Okay, so we've got a console error message. Let's have a look what we have here. So my eyes doesn't have the right number of channels. Right, so I've missed out my eyes overlay. Very easy to do. So let's quickly go and fix that. So in my eyes overlay, yep, there we go. I forgot to put those textures in. Where are we? So let's have our eyes and their bump map, which I believe is there. And again, these don't have a specular map, so I'm just going to pop empty in there for the moment. Right, so that should be that fixed. Let's run again and see what we get. Oh, there we go. Now quite clearly on the face I've got the wrong specular map in there, but as you can see, our seams are no longer visible. Let's have a look in the scene view. Where's he gone? Let's hit F just to focus in on him. There he is. So there we go. Look under the arms. This is now stitching together nicely. And again at the head, so we've got none of that nasty UV stuff. Let's just fix the face here. Again, you saw a seam there on the head because the specular map's wrong. So this is what happens when you rush and try and bang these tutorials out quickly. Let's go back to the face overlay. Let's see what we've got here. Yeah, you can see I've got the legs map in there. I don't know. Needs sacking. So let's find the face. There it is. There's the face. That looks better. Let's run again, and there should be no seam at all now. There we go. That looks much better. And what we should also have, if we open our character up and have a look in his UMA renderer, in here we should have all of our blend shapes available. And let's just see if they work. There we go. Probably a bit better to see in the scene view. So there we go, we're starting to get morphs that have actually come across as well. So we have a Uma with morphs on there. So the next step from here is to set up our DNA to make this lot work. Now there might be a slight pause in this series purely because there is a new DNA system being developed, which should make things a little bit easier. So I'm going to wait. If you do want to go ahead and set up the DNA to control these morphs, have a look back on UMA 301 where I will show you how to do this on a Fuse character. But until then, if you just wait, the next video in this series I'll show you how to use the new system to create DNA that we can fiddle about with at runtime. Okay, thank you for watching. And once again, I'd like to say a big thank you to my patrons for making this possible. If you would like to support me, feel free to click that link at the end of the video. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.